Alex Grace, a former exotic dancer, has come forward alleging that she's had a years-long affair with a Republican Texas state lawmaker, Giovanni Capriglione. Capriglione is the self-described pro-life champion. Oh, but guess what? He has now been accused of having paid for his mistress to have several abortions. Here's more from Grace.
Out of all the videos I've ever made, I can say without a doubt, this is my least favorite video. I don't want to do it, but I am. And it's going to come out. So you're going to find out one way or the other. So I may as well tell you myself. I know that Giovanni Capriglione has been having affairs since 2005 because it's me. I'm her. I'm not proud of it. In fact, I'm ashamed of it. Hopefully you can keep in mind that we all have a past. And I wish I could say for him that that was the worst of it, but it's not.
The next day, Grace followed up with more details in a 5.5-minute long TikTok video.
There were conversations that took place where he would ask me, how much would you make if you went into work today? I would give him that number. And the option was, well, you can either go to work or I'm happy to give you that same amount to just hang out with me. And that's what we did. It started off as a friendship. Over time, it developed into a more intimate relationship. So let's clarify that a little bit. His wife was aware. She had full knowledge. Another assumption that is being made is I am bitter. I have absolutely no bitterness towards him. He was my friend. He was someone I could call during a rough time in my life. He was not only a friend, but he was a mentor at times. He pushed me to further succeed in life. There were questionable moments, and I believe that at my young age, maybe call it being naive, call it being dismissive or blind. I'm not really sure how to label it. But I overlooked a lot of different issues.
She goes on to say that she waited to say anything because she was concerned about any negative effects that her coming out might have on his daughters, and she clarifies that Capriglione was not a politician when they first met. However, once he did get into office, she became disappointed in his politics to the point that she felt the need to finally speak out regarding his seeming hypocrisy, particularly as it pertains to women's rights. She also says that she doesn't identify as either pro-choice or pro-life, but then when she attempts to explain her thoughts on the issue, she actually describes a very pro-choice stance.
This year especially has been very enlightening as to how rapidly women's rights are eroding. When I had spoken to him in one of our last conversations, I urged him to stay true to himself. I wouldn't consider myself pro-life or pro-choice. I think if it's a pregnancy that is a result of incest or a rape or would somehow terminate the mother's life, then that is their decision, their right to make that choice. What is best for them? What would be best for that child? So I'm very torn on that issue. For someone to co-author legislation saying that all abortion should be done away with, when they have personally used that as an outlet to further their career or to protect their own personal life, all I ask is that you stay true to yourself.
I think that's something a lot of women deal with regarding the pro-choice movement. Even though we want the right to choose, that includes the right not to choose to have an abortion. Either way, it's a choice that we want to make for ourselves rather than have it dictated to us by some man or some Bible or some law. So while it seems as though she has some thoughts as to what should and should not be allowed, and while she seems that she would still like certain exceptions outlined in the law, she ultimately appears to be pro-choice. But honestly, it doesn't really matter what her thoughts are. The reason why this is relevant to anyone is because she is calling out an anti-choice lawmaker who has engaged in behavior that he publicly stands against and blocks others from engaging in. In her words, she wants him to stay true to himself. In other words, she doesn't like the hypocrisy or the disconnect between what he says and promotes and legislates versus what he does. So here's more.
My hope for him was that he would be the voice that we needed to not only do what was right and stay true to himself, but within his position, protect women's rights. But what is the point of being in your position when you can do better for the people? But instead, he chose to take a very selfish position while eroding women's rights.
So, of course, Grace is now coming under fire for things that are not really relevant to this angle of the story. People are calling her a pick-me for saying that she wasn't the typical stripper and that she never wanted to do that kind of work. She just did what she had to do to take care of her family, implying that other girls who fall into similar lines of work aren't doing that exact same thing. People are discrediting her for being the other woman, saying that she's not a girl's girl for sleeping with a married man. Sure. Others are saying that she's not really pro-choice, despite describing a very pro-choice stance, because she still believes, to some extent, that there should be some regulations around when abortions are allowed. She just wants more lenient regulations than the ones that are currently in place in places like Texas. Either way, this woman is a voter. She is not a politician. I don't know what she does for a living now, but I'm not looking to her for political guidance any more than I'm looking to anyone else. But the only part of this story that I'm currently interested in is the hypocrisy of a Texas state lawmaker telling people that they cannot do the things that he himself has done. And presumably, he did it to help his political career so that he wouldn't have a bunch of bastard children running around out there tainting his good Christian image. Meanwhile, he and his colleagues have made it impossible for others who aren't super rich or who don't work in government to make similar choices for themselves and their families, and yes, their careers. And speaking anecdotally, I know plenty of women who have had abortions, including some who are now very, very anti-abortion. The hypocrisy is lost on them, however, because they feel as though they're speaking from a place of experience. They went through this horrible thing, so they understand the emotional toll that it takes on people. So they want to prevent others from experiencing that same thing. In their minds, they're like the big sisters that we all need. Meanwhile, they were able to go on, get married, start their families when they wanted to do so, get their education, establish themselves in their careers, and more. They were given choices that they now want to deny other women, even though their lives would have been demonstrably different had they chosen differently. Meanwhile, Capriglione has admitted to the affair but denies paying for any abortions. Grace also waited to tell her story until after Capriglione announced that he would no longer be seeking re-election in 2026. When Grace was pressed for more details regarding her revelation during an interview she did with right-wing outlet Current Revolt, she didn't have much proof to back up her claims. She simply said, "You're going to have to go with my word." Living in Texas, it is obviously frustrating to hear that the politicians who vote against women's rights and healthcare and the right to choose are paying their mistresses for abortions, but it is not surprising. We know, or at least suspect, that they're all doing it to some extent. They do things that they are not supposed to do, and they do it out in the open all the time. They say one thing, do another. They're the worst. They don't stand for anything apart from their own self-interest. The story here is not about the affair. It's about accountability. In this particular case, I don't expect a whole lot to come from it. This is just a state lawmaker, so most people aren't going to be too concerned about this. Most people aren't going to be paying attention to stories like this one. He has denied the worst of it, and she's got no proof backing up her claims, so the story kind of dies on the vine. But there is another quick point that I do want to make, and that is that we need to be paying attention to our state and local leaders. This guy authored the abortion trigger ban bill, so he is a big part of the reason why women lost their rights in this state. He's not the only reason, but he is certainly culpable. And that alone is enough of a reason for people in this state to want him and others like him out of office. The alleged hypocrisy just drives the whole point home that our elected leaders really are not out there thinking about us, all right? That's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.